Commander Vex stood in his private quarters staring at the reports scattered across his desk. 3 more incidents in the past day. A guard had been injured when a maintenance panel exploded in his face. The food processing system had malfunctioned and contaminated an entire batch of rations, and somehow the security cameras in Section 7 had all stopped working at the same time. The pattern was becoming too obvious to ignore. Someone was systematically attacking his ship, and he was certain he knew who it was. Vex called for Guard Captain Drex to come to his quarters immediately. When the scarred Carathian arrived, Vex could see the stress in his subordinate's posture. Drex's forearms were tense and his yellow eyes kept darting toward the door as if expecting an attack. "This cannot continue," Vex said without greeting. "The crew is becoming afraid of their own shadows. Yesterday I saw 2 guards checking the same corridor 3 times before they would walk through it." "The men are on edge, sir," Drex admitted. "These constant problems make them feel like the ship itself is working against them." "Because it is," Vex slammed one of his clawed hands down on the desk. "And I know exactly who is responsible." He activated the wall screen and pulled up the prisoner records. Jake Collins's image appeared, the human's calm face staring back at them from his capture photo. "This one," Vex pointed at the screen. "Everything started after we brought him aboard. Humans are known for their devious nature and their refusal to accept defeat. He is organizing the other prisoners somehow." Drex studied the image. "But sir, we have watched him carefully. He sits in his cage like all the others. He has no contact with prisoners outside his immediate area, and even those conversations are just basic communication." "Then he is more clever than we thought," Vex replied. "Humans are masters of deception. They fought our empire to a standstill using nothing but tricks and lies." Vex walked to the window that looked out into space, his reflection showing the anger in his glowing eyes. "I have decided to make an example of this human. Tomorrow, during the feeding cycle, we will bring all prisoners to the main cargo bay and execute him publicly. When the others see what happens to those who resist, these problems will end." Drex shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, is it wise to gather all the prisoners in one place? If there really is organized resistance—" "There will be no resistance, Vex. Cut him off. We will have every guard armed and ready. Let them try something while we hold their leader at weapons point. They will learn the price of defying the Carathian Empire." The next morning, the ship's intercom crackled to life with an announcement that made every prisoner's blood run cold. All slaves were to be brought to Cargo Bay 3 for what Commander Vex called an important lesson in obedience. As the guards began opening cages and chaining prisoners together, Zara felt panic rising in her chest. This was not part of any plan Jake had shared with her. When the guards reached his cage, Jake offered no resistance as they bound his hands with special restraints designed for dangerous prisoners. As they were marched through the ship's corridors, Zara managed to get close enough to Jake to whisper, urgently, "What do we do? This was not planned." Jake's voice was calm despite the situation. "Sometimes plans change, Zara. Remember everything I taught you about adapting to unexpected circumstances." "But they are going to kill you," she whispered back. "Maybe," Jake said quietly. "But remember what I told you about humans. We do not surrender, even when we should. Especially when we should." Cargo Bay 3 was a vast space normally used for storing goods taken from conquered worlds. Now it had been cleared except for a single platform in the center where a Carathian execution device had been set up. The prisoners were forced to sit on the cold floor in a large circle around the platform, while armed guards took positions at every exit. Commander Vex entered wearing his full ceremonial uniform, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he walked to the platform. His voice echoed through the bay when he spoke. "Slaves of the Empire," he began, "you have forgotten your place. Someone among you has been causing problems on my ship, thinking they could resist the will of the Carathian people." He gestured, and the guards brought Jake forward, forcing him to his knees on the platform. This human thought he could organize. "Rebellion among you?" Vex continued. "He thought his species' reputation for cunning would protect him. Today you will learn that no one defies the Empire and lives." Zara looked around at the other prisoners. She could see fear in their faces, But also something else, anger. Jake had spent weeks teaching them to think differently, to see themselves as fighters rather than victims. Now they were watching their teacher about to die, and the rage was building. "Any last words, human?" Vex asked mockingly as he raised the execution weapon. Jake looked up at the commander with those calm, calculating eyes that had never shown fear. "Just one thing," he said clearly. "You have made a serious tactical error." Vex paused, confused. "What error?" Jake smiled, and for the first time since Zara had known him, the smile was not cold at all. It was warm, proud, and completely without fear. "You brought all of us together in one place," Jake said, "and you assumed that killing me would break their spirit." "It will," Vex said confidently. "No," Jake replied. "It will free them from the last thing holding them back." Before Vex could ask what he meant, Jake turned to look at all the prisoners gathered around the platform. His voice carried clearly through the vast space. "My friends," he said, "I taught you that humans never surrender. But I also taught you something else. Sometimes a leader must fall so that others can rise." Zara felt something break open inside her chest. Not despair, but something fierce and bright and unstoppable. "Remember what I taught you about being predators instead of prey," Jake continued. "Remember that fear is a choice and you can choose differently." Vex raised his weapon higher, angry at losing control of the situation. "Enough words, human. Time to die. Remember," Jake called out as the weapon powered up, "that humans learned something important long ago. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has nothing left to lose." The execution device fired, but Jake's words had already done their work. Around the room, prisoners who had spent weeks learning to think like humans suddenly realized that they had nothing left to lose either. What happened next would later be called the Cargo Bay Massacre by Carathian military historians, though they would never understand how a group of unarmed slaves had managed to overcome armed guards in a matter of minutes. Zara would remember only fragments of those first few moments. The sound of Draxian battle cries as the gray-skinned warriors threw themselves at the nearest guards, the sight of Metherans moving with pack coordination they had practiced in secret, the feeling of her own hands closing around a fallen guard's weapon. But most of all, she would remember Jake's voice calling out instructions, even as the chaos erupted around him, still teaching them, still leading them, still refusing to surrender even in his final moments. The hunt had begun, but the hunters and the hunted were not who Commander Vex had expected them to be. The accident started small and seemed random at first. A food dispenser would malfunction and spray hot liquid on a guard's feet. A door would stick at exactly the wrong moment, causing guards to bump into each other. Cleaning chemicals would somehow get mixed together, creating foul smells that made the Carathians sick. Commander Vex grew more irritated with each incident, but he could find no pattern to blame on the prisoners. Each problem seemed like normal ship maintenance issues, the kind of things that happened on any vessel that had been in space for a long time. Jake had taught the prisoners to be patient and careful. "Never let them see that these things are connected," he had explained during one of their secret meetings. "Each problem must look like bad luck or poor maintenance. If they suspect organized resistance, they will punish everyone." Zara had become Jake's most trusted helper in organizing the other prisoners. Her gentle manner and scientific background made the others trust her, while her quick mind helped her understand Jake's increasingly complex plans. The key, Jake had told her, is to make them paranoid without giving them a target for their anger. Paranoid enemies make mistakes, and we need them to make many mistakes. She learned to approach different species in ways that would motivate them most effectively. When speaking to the Draxians, she talked about honor and the duty to fight oppression. With the Metherans, she emphasized pack loyalty and working together. For the more timid species, she spoke gently about small acts of resistance that would not put them in immediate danger. Each group was given different tasks that matched their abilities. The Draxians, who were naturally strong, were taught to create mechanical problems that required force, loosening bolts, bending metal components, or blocking ventilation systems. The Metharans, who had excellent hearing and night vision, became scouts and lookouts, warning others when guards were approaching. The smaller, more agile species learned to move through the ship's maintenance tunnels, placing small obstacles, or retrieving useful items that could be turned into tools. Even the most frightened prisoners had roles to play, creating distractions or carrying messages between groups. Zara found herself thinking like a scientist again, but instead of studying alien biology, she was analyzing Carathian behavior patterns. She noticed that Guard Captain Drex always favored his right side when he walked, suggesting an old injury that could be exploited. She observed that the younger guards became nervous when separated from their partners, and that the night shift guards were generally less alert than the day shift. "You are becoming dangerous," Jake told her one evening, and she could hear the approval in his voice. "Your people may have been peaceful, but you have the mind of a warrior." "I do not feel like a warrior," Zara admitted. "I still feel afraid most of the time." "Fear is not the enemy," Jake explained. "Cowardice is the enemy. A warrior can be afraid and still fight. In fact, fear can make you more careful, more planning, more deadly." As the days passed, the small acts of sabotage grew bolder. Food supplies began to spoil mysteriously. Guard weapons would jam at inconvenient moments. The ship's communication system developed strange static problems that made it difficult for different sections to coordinate with each other. The prisoners had learned to work as a team, using Jake's human tactics of deception and misdirection. When a guard would come to investigate a problem, he would find only frightened slaves who seemed to know nothing about anything. But the moment he left, the resistance would strike somewhere else. Zara discovered that she had a talent for reading Carathian emotions and predicting their reactions. She could tell when a guard was becoming suspicious, when one was feeling confident enough to be careless, or when fear was starting to affect their judgment. "The young one, Guard Yex, is beginning to crack," she reported to Jake during one of their planning sessions. "He jumps at every sound and looks over his shoulder constantly. I think he suspects something, but cannot prove it." "Good," Jake said. "Fear spreads among groups just like hope does. If we can make one guard paranoid, he will make the others paranoid too." The resistance had also begun gathering intelligence about the ship itself. Through careful observation and occasional scouting missions through maintenance tunnels, they had mapped out most of the vessel's layout. They knew where the weapons were stored, where the escape pods were located, and most importantly, where the ship's main control systems could be accessed. Jake had taught them that information was just as valuable as weapons, sometimes more so. "An enemy you understand is an enemy you can defeat," he would say, "but an enemy who does not understand you will defeat himself." The psychological pressure on the Carathian crew was beginning to show. Guards snapped at each other more frequently. Simple duties took longer to complete because everyone was double-checking everything. The captain held more meetings, trying to identify the source of the problems. During one such meeting, which the prisoners could overhear through the ventilation system, Commander Vex's frustration was obvious. "These incidents cannot all be coincidental," his voice carried through the metal walls. "Someone is sabotaging my ship." "But sir," came the nervous voice of Guard Captain Drex, "we have searched the prisoner sections multiple times. They have no tools, no weapons, no way to coordinate with each other." "Then how do you explain the pattern of failures?" Vex demanded. "Perhaps the ship is simply showing its age," suggested another voice. "These older vessels require more maintenance." "This ship was perfectly maintained until we took on the new batch of prisoners," Vex growled. "And I know there was a human among them." Zara felt her heart race as she listened. The captain was getting closer to the truth. "The humans are known for their tricks," Vex continued. "Perhaps this one is more clever than we thought." "Should we interrogate the human separately?" Drex asked. "Not yet," Vex said after a pause. "If we single him out, it might confirm that we suspect organized resistance. For now, increase security and watch all the prisoners more carefully. If there is a pattern, we will find it." When Zara reported this conversation to Jake, she expected him to be worried. Instead, he smiled that cold smile she had learned to recognize. "Perfect," he said quietly. "Perfect?" Zara was confused. "They suspect you specifically now." "Yes, but notice what else they said. They are afraid to interrogate me because they do not want to confirm their suspicions. This means they are not certain, and uncertain enemies are weak enemies. Jake leaned closer to the bars of his cage. More importantly, they are going to increase security, which means pulling guards from other duties. When people are stretched too thin, they make bigger mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that will give us the opportunity we have been waiting for, Jake said. It is time to move from sabotage to something more direct. Zara felt a mixture of excitement and terror. What do you mean? I mean it is time to teach the Carathians what humans learned a long time ago, Jake said, his voice carrying that dangerous edge again. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. That night, as Zara lay in her cage trying to sleep, she realized that she was no longer the same frightened girl who had been captured on her home world. Jake had changed her, had changed all of them. They were still prisoners, but they were no longer victims. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Over the next few days, Zara found herself waiting for the quiet times when Jake would speak. The human seemed to know exactly when the guards were far enough away that they could talk without being heard. During these moments, he would ask questions about the other prisoners, about the ship, and about their captors. "Tell me about your people, Zara," Jake said during one of their whispered conversations. "What were you before this happened?" Zara closed her eyes and remembered her old life. "I was a student," she said softly. "I studied different kinds of life forms on many worlds. My people, the Veltharians, we loved to learn about other species. We built schools and libraries, not weapons. And that is why the Carathians found you easy to conquer," Jake said, but his voice was not cruel. "Your people thought that being peaceful would protect you." "Yes," Zara whispered. "We had no armies, no warships. When the Carathians came, we tried to negotiate. We offered them our knowledge, our art, our friendship. They took everything and killed most of us anyway." She heard Jake sigh in the darkness. "My people learned long ago that sometimes you must fight to protect what you love. We had wars on our own world for thousands of years before we reached the stars. It taught us that peace is only possible when you are strong enough to defend it." "But you were captured too," Zara pointed out. "Yes," Jake admitted. "But I was not trying to avoid capture. I was gathering information about this ship, about their routes, about their weaknesses. Sometimes a soldier must let himself be caught to serve a larger purpose." This confused Zara. "You wanted to be captured?" "Not wanted," Jake corrected. "But I accepted it as a possibility. My mission was to learn how the Carathians move their slaves and supplies. Now I know their procedures, their guard rotations, their ship layout. This information will help my people plan better attacks." "But how will your people get this information if you are trapped here?" In the dim light, Zara could see Jake's teeth as he smiled. "Who says I am trapped?" The next day, Jake began teaching the other prisoners things that seemed strange at first. He told them to watch the guards carefully and remember everything they saw. He taught them to count the steps between their cages and the exits, to notice which guards were nervous and which were confident, to listen for sounds that might tell them about other parts of the ship. "Humans have a saying," Jake explained to the small group of prisoners who had gathered to listen. "Knowledge is power. The Carathians want to keep you ignorant because ignorant slaves are easier to control." Kryn, the Draxian, shook his head. "But what good is this knowledge? We are locked in cages. We have no weapons." Jake looked at him seriously. "Everything can be a weapon if you know how to use it. The food bowls they give us are made of metal. The water pipes above our heads carry pressure. Even our own bodies can be weapons if we use them correctly." He began teaching them other things too. How to move silently, how to hide small objects, how to communicate without speaking. These lessons always happened during the rest periods when the guards were fewer and less alert. Zara proved to be a quick student. Her background in studying different species helped her understand the behaviors Jake was teaching them. She began to notice things she had missed before. The way certain guards favored their left sides when they walked, suggesting old injuries, or how the youngest guards always looked nervous when they were alone. "You have a good mind for this," Jake told her during one of their private conversations. "Your people studied life forms, so you understand behavior patterns. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need. What do you mean? Zara asked. Humans learn to survive by being smarter than bigger, stronger predators, Jake explained. We studied our enemies, learned their weaknesses, and used those weaknesses against them. The Carathians are bigger and stronger than humans, but they have weaknesses too. What weaknesses? Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. They believe their own propaganda. They think they are superior to all other species, which makes them careless. They rely too much on their technology and not enough on their brains. And most importantly, they do not understand the power of hope. Hope? Zara repeated. Yes. The Carathians rule through fear. They want their slaves to believe that resistance is impossible, but humans have learned that a person who has nothing left to lose can be the most dangerous enemy of all. As the days passed, Jake's influence spread through the prisoner section. He taught different groups different skills, always being careful, not to let the guards notice any organized activity. To the Draxians, who valued honor and strength, he spoke about the honor of fighting for freedom. To the Metherans, who were pack hunters by nature, he talked about working together as a team. Each species responded to different approaches, and Jake seemed to understand exactly what motivated each group. Zara realized that this too was a kind of knowledge, understanding not just what people could do, but what they wanted to do. How do you know so much about different species? She asked him one night. My people have been fighting this war for 2 years, Jake replied. We have rescued many slaves from ships like this one. Each group we saved taught us something about their species, their culture, their ways of thinking. We learned that freedom means different things to different people. What does freedom mean to humans? Jake thought about this for a long time before answering. For humans, freedom means the right to choose your own path, even if that path is dangerous. It means being able to protect the people you care about. It means never having to bow to someone just because they are stronger than you. Zara felt that strange warm feeling in her chest again. I want that kind of freedom. Then you shall have it, Jake said firmly. But first we must make the Carathians afraid. Afraid? How can we make them afraid when we are the prisoners? Jake's voice carried a hint of something dangerous when he answered. Because fear is not about who has the bigger weapons, Zara. Fear is about not knowing what your enemy will do next. And humans are very, very good at being unpredictable. The next morning, the first small act of rebellion began. A guard slipped on a wet patch of floor near the food distribution area and fell heavily, injuring his arm. The water had leaked from a pipe that had somehow developed a small crack during the night. Commander Vex came to investigate personally, his yellow eyes scanning the prisoner suspiciously. But all he saw were the same broken slaves he always saw, sitting quietly in their cages looking as helpless as ever. He never noticed Jake's small smile, or the way Zara's eyes had started to burn with something new and dangerous. The metal floor was cold and dirty under Zara's bare feet as she pressed herself against the back wall of her cage. Around her, dozens of other prisoners sat in similar small spaces, all waiting for something terrible to happen. The air smelled of fear and unwashed bodies, mixed with the sharp chemical scent that the Carathian guards used to clean their weapons. Zara pulled her thin arms around her knees and tried to make herself smaller. Her pale blue skin had dark bruises on it from the last time she had tried to resist. The silver markings that ran down her arms and face, once a source of pride for her people, now felt like targets that made her easy to spot among the other slaves. She had been on this ship for 3 cycles now, ever since the Carathians had destroyed her homeworld. Every day was the same routine of fear, pain, and waiting. The guards would come with their shock sticks and loud voices, dragging prisoners away for work or punishment. Some never came back. The sound of heavy boots on metal made all the prisoners look up. The main door to their section was opening, and Commander Vex was walking in with his usual group of armed guards. Vex was tall even for a Carathian, with dark red skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. His black uniform had bright silver markings that showed his rank, and his eyes glowed yellow in the dim light. Behind the guards came a line of new prisoners, chained together at their wrists and ankles. Zara watched them shuffle past her cage, looking for any faces she might know from her home world. Most of the new slaves were species she had seen before, some Draxians with their thick gray skin, a few Mitharans with their fox-like faces, and several others she could not identify. Then she saw him. At the end of the line was a being unlike any she had ever seen before. He was shorter than most of the other prisoners, with pale pink skin and dark hair on his head. His clothes were torn and dirty, but he stood straight despite the heavy chains. What caught Zara's attention most were his eyes. They were not filled with fear or despair like the others, but moved constantly, studying everything around him. The guards pushed the new prisoners into empty cages near Zara's section. As they locked each door, the strange pale being kept watching the guards, counting them, noting which weapons they carried. When the guards moved away, Zara could hear the other prisoners starting to whisper among themselves in various languages. "What? Is that one?" asked Kryn, a Draxian in the cage next to Zara. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I do not know," Zara replied in the common galactic language they all use to speak with each other. "His skin is so strange, and his size is small." An older Mitharan named Jex leaned forward in his cage. "I have heard stories," he said quietly. "There is a new species that has been fighting the Carathians. They call themselves humans, and the Empire fears them." "Why would the Empire fear such a small creature?" Kryn asked. Jex's ears twitched nervously. "Because they do not fight like civilized beings. They use tricks and lies, and they never surrender, even when they should. The guards say they are mad." Zara looked back at the human in his cage. He was sitting calmly, but his eyes were still moving, still watching. When he caught her looking at him, he did not look away in fear like most prisoners would. Instead, he studied her face for a moment, then gave her a small nod. That night, when the ship's lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, Zara could not rest. She kept thinking about the human and what Jex had said. Around her, the other prisoners made soft sounds of pain and fear in their sleep. Some cried for families they would never see again. Others whispered prayers to gods who seemed to have forgotten them. But from the direction of the human's cage there was only silence. The next morning brought the usual routine. Guards came with food, a thin, tasteless liquid that barely kept them alive. As they moved through the cages, Zara noticed that the human was watching them again, counting their steps, timing how long they spent at each cage. When the guards reached his cage, the human did something unexpected. Instead of cowering like most prisoners, he stood up and spoke to them in perfect Carathian language. "Good morning, guards. I hope your duty shift is pleasant today." The guards stopped and stared at him. One of them, a young Carathian with nervous movements, stepped back and raised his shock stick. "How does this slave know our language?" the nervous guard asked his partner. The older guard laughed. "This is one of the humans we captured. They learn quickly, but they are still just animals." He looked at the human with cruel eyes. "Enjoy learning our words, human. Soon you will learn our pain as well." The human smiled, but there was something cold in his expression. "I am always eager to learn new things," he said. "Perhaps you could teach me about your ship's layout, or your guard schedules." The older guard's face darkened with anger. He raised his shock stick and pressed it against the cage bars, sending blue sparks flying. "You will learn respect, human." But the human did not step back. Instead, he moved closer to the bars. "My name is Jake Collins," he said calmly. "What is yours, guard?" The question seemed to confuse the Carathian. Slaves never asked guards for their names. They never acted like equals. The guard looked around, unsure what to do, then hit the cage bars harder with his stick. "Slaves do not need names," he growled, then moved on to the next cage. After the guards left, the prison section was quiet for a long time. Then Jake Collins spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the metal walls. "My name is Jake Collins," he said again. "I am a human from the planet Earth. I was captured during a mission to gather information about Carathian ship movements. I am 28 years old and I have been a soldier for 10 years. The other prisoners listened in amazement. No one ever told the truth about themselves. It was too dangerous. But the human continued. "I know that most of you have given up hope," Jake said. The Carathians want you to believe that you are helpless, that you will always be slaves. But they are wrong. Zara felt something strange in her chest, a feeling she had not had since her world burned. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Hope. She pressed her face against the bars of her cage and whispered toward Jake's voice. "Please," she said in the galactic common language. "Help us. Help me." There was silence for a moment. Then Jake's voice came back, gentle but strong. "What is your name?" "Zara," she whispered. "Zara," Jake repeated. "That is a beautiful name. Tell me, Zara, do you want to be free?" "Yes," she breathed. "Then we will be free," Jake said simply. "But first you must learn to think like a human." The battle for Cargo Bay 3 lasted only 12 minutes, but it changed everything. When the smoke cleared and the last Carathian guard had fallen, Zara found herself standing over Commander Vex's body, holding his personal weapon in her shaking hands. Around her, the other prisoners were gathering weapons and checking on their wounded. Jake was still alive, though badly injured from the execution device's partial discharge. The weapon had been designed to kill slowly, and Vex's surprise at the sudden rebellion had caused him to release the trigger before delivering a fatal blow. "Status report," Jake said weakly as Zara knelt beside him, his training taking over, even in his wounded state. "All guards in this section are down," reported Kryn, the Draxian warrior who had led the initial charge. "We have their weapons and communication devices." "The doors?" Jake asked. "Sealed from the inside," said Jex the old Matheran. "We use their own security protocols against them." Jake managed a pained smile. "Good. That will buy us time." "Zara, are you hurt?" She looked down at herself in surprise. There was blood on her clothes, but she realized none of it was hers. "I am fine," she said, though her voice sounded strange in her own ears. "Listen to me carefully," Jake said, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "This was the easy part. Now we have to take the ship." "The ship," Zara repeated. "But we are just escaped prisoners." "No," Jake corrected her firmly. "We are no longer prisoners at all. We are soldiers now, and soldiers complete their missions." Over the next hour, Jake directed the newly freed slaves in a systematic takeover of the ship. Using the intelligence they had gathered during weeks of careful observation, they struck at key locations throughout the vessel. The Carathians, who had never faced an internal uprising, were unprepared for coordinated attacks from within their own ship. The Draxians used their natural strength to overwhelm guards in the armory and weapons storage areas. The Matharans moved through ventilation systems to disable communications and life support controls. The smaller species infiltrated critical system areas that the larger Carathians could not easily access. Zara found herself leading a group to the ship's bridge, using her knowledge of Carathian behavior patterns to predict how the remaining crew would respond to the crisis. Jake had been right about her having a warrior's mind. She could see 3 moves ahead, anticipating the enemy's reactions and countering them before they happened. The bridge crew had barricaded themselves behind heavy doors and were calling for help from other Carathian ships in the area. But their distress signals were being jammed by the communication equipment the slaves had captured, and the ship's own defensive systems had been turned against them. "They are trapped in there like animals," observed Kryn as they prepared to breach the bridge doors. "No," Zara corrected him, remembering Jake's lessons. "Animals fight when cornered. These are creatures who have forgotten how to fight, because they have relied on fear and superior numbers for too long." When they finally broke through the doors, the remaining Carathian officers surrendered without a battle. The sight of armed, former slaves moving with military precision and cold determination had broken their will to resist. Captain Vex's personal quarters contained detailed star charts showing the locations of other slave ships, as well as communication codes that would allow them to contact the human resistance. Jake, despite his injuries, insisted on being brought to the bridge to send a message to his people. "Human Command, this is Lieutenant Jake Collins aboard the captured Carathian vessel Void Harvester." He spoke into the communication device. "Mission accomplished. We have detailed intelligence on enemy ship movements and approximately 300 liberated slaves ready to join the fight. The response came back almost immediately, crackling with static and excitement. Jake Collins. This is Admiral Carter. We thought you were dead. What is your status? Wounded but functional, Jake replied. And sir, I need to report something important. These slaves are not just victims anymore. They are potential allies. Over the following days, as the captured ship made its way to a rendezvous with the human fleet, Zara worked with Jake to organize the former slaves into an effective fighting force. Many of them had natural abilities that could be valuable in combat. The Draxian's strength, the Metheran's pack coordination, the various species' knowledge of different worlds and cultures. But more importantly, they all now shared something that the Carathian Empire could not understand or counter: the human way of thinking. They had learned to see themselves as predators rather than prey, to value intelligence over brute force, and to never surrender even when the odds seemed impossible. You have given us more than freedom, Zara told Jake as they stood on the bridge, watching human ships appear on the scanner. You have given us hope. No, Jake corrected her gently. I just reminded you that you already had it. Every species has the capacity to fight for what matters to them. Humans just learned how to do it effectively. When they reached the human fleet, Zara was amazed by what she saw. The ships were smaller than Carathian vessels, but they moved, with purpose and coordination that spoke of superior tactics and training. More surprisingly, she could see other species among the human crews, other former slaves who had chosen to join the fight. Admiral Carter, a stern woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, greeted them personally when they boarded the flagship. Lieutenant, Collins tells me that you led the uprising after he was wounded, she said to Zara. That shows impressive leadership under pressure. I only did what Jake taught me, Zara replied, which is exactly what good leadership should be, the Admiral said with approval. We could use someone with your skills and knowledge of different species. Over the following months, Zara found herself becoming something she had never imagined: a military commander in the growing alliance against the Carathian Empire. The former slaves from the Void Harvester became the core of a new unit that specialized in liberation missions, using their knowledge of Carathian procedures and slave ship layouts to free others. They called themselves the Human Liberation Corps, though only a small percentage of them were actually human. The name represented not their species but their way of thinking, the approach to warfare and resistance that Jake had taught them. Jake recovered from his injuries and continued to serve as a tactical advisor, but he insisted that Zara and the other former slaves take leadership roles. This is your fight now, he would tell them. We humans just showed you that it was possible to win. The war against the Carathian Empire continued for 3 more years, but it was no longer the same war. Word of the human way of fighting had spread throughout the galaxy, carried by rescued slaves who had learned to think like warriors instead of victims. Entire worlds that had been conquered began to resist their oppressors, using tactics of sabotage, psychological warfare, and coordinated uprising. The empire, which had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for centuries, found itself facing an enemy it could not understand, hope backed by human tactical thinking. Zara often thought about that first night when she had whispered to Jake, asking for help. She had expected him to save her, but instead he had taught her to save herself. That, she realized, was the most human thing of all, not doing everything for others, but showing them that they could do it themselves. Years later, when the Carathian Empire finally fell and the galaxy began the long process of rebuilding, Zara would establish schools on dozens of worlds. These schools taught many subjects: science, art, philosophy, and culture. But they all shared one common lesson that was taught to every student, regardless of their species. The lesson Jake Collins had taught her in a dark prison cell aboard a slave ship: that being afraid was not the same as being helpless, and that sometimes the greatest victory was learning to think like a human.